know I'm a dreamer, but my heart's of gold. I had to run away high, so I wouldn't come home low. Just when things went right, it doesn't mean they were always wrong. Just take this song, and you'll never be left all alone. Take me to your heart, feel me in your bones. Just one more night, and I'm coming on this lonely, winding road. I'm on my way, I'm on my way, home sweet home. Tonight, I'm on my way, I'm on my way, home sweet home. You know that I've seen too many romantic dreams, up in lights falling off the silver screen. My heart's like an open book for the whole world to read. Sometimes nothing keeps me together at the seams. I'm on my way, I'm on my way, home sweet home. Tonight, I'm on my way, just set me free, home sweet home. Home sweet home. Home sweet home. Home sweet home.
Hi, Pete.
You're going to let that completely fade out? Are both
Well, hey, my introduction is not as long as Joe's on his show.
Well, I like Joe's, though.
Joe's is a very interesting, Joe's going to be there. Here you go talking about me again. But Joe's,
I picked that specifically for him, If you listen to the words for that song, they sum up Joe Didi very, very, very well.
I'll have to I know that you don't. I like that you don't know me, because you and I were just talking about it, and Joe and I always, when we have our discussions, that's the one thing I like about Joe. You don't may necessarily know him, but you're gonna know what he has to say.
That's true.
He's never gonna hold a punch, and that's one of the things I love about Joe the most. So, Peter, here we are. It's now a couple days later because you got to go watch some rockets take off.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I've reached out to the Laura Cadigan, who is the science supervisor for secondary education. And I'm trying to get our kids kind of hooked up with the space community because I think that has a lot of benefit to the STEM programs around here.
I was going to say with the push for STEM, and it's interesting because, we need manufacturing in this country. We're starting to find that out as people start to age out. But it's interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day in our country. We're kind of like, we don't have that anymore. We've shipped off so much. Hopefully some of that changes now after yesterday. We bring some of that manufacturing more back to the United States. And,
It's amazing how many aerospace parts are made in this area.
There, and that's
Still
exactly
to this day.
And a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of military stuff also. Aerospace, military. There's a lot of stuff that goes on around here that people, if you're not in the know, you'd be very, very surprised. And everybody thinks about Pratt and Whitney back in the day, Hamilton Standard, but there's a lot. And like you said, the aerospace.
Well, a
industry.
lot of the tool and die shops in the area are specifically making manufacturing parts for aircraft, for space, and that a feeder into the Hamilton Standard, which is all that huge defense group.
Yeah. Well, when I went to Southwick High,
Pratt.
we still had we called it metal shop back in the day. So a lot of my former classmates from there, when we had that program, even then before they wouldn't go to Vogue, but we still have a lot of guys that would do not really the co-op because it was Southwick High, but we did the work thing. I forget what the hell they call that. Oh, excuse my bluntness, but where they do the like they do here, where they go once they get further on in their years, they go to do the
apprenticeship.
I was going to call it work release, but that's for prisoners.
Apprenticeship. Yeah, apprenticeships.
But yeah, so it's that's the good thing with what we have here, and it's interesting.
But yeah, so I'm trying to get them interested in that, and I have a student that runs the astronomy club at Westfield High, and is also an educator at the Springfield Science Museums in the astronomy area, and the planetarium. So she's super interested in doing something. I've been trying to get something off the ground. It's just I don't have the time myself to kind of write and produce a show. I have enough time. I have enough time to do what I got to do paperwork wise, and then tech all the shows that I tech every week. It's been a pet project. I've talked to NASA about it. They're super interested that if we can get a student or a teenage-centric production to doing astronomy in space, they'd be interested in carrying it. So there's that too, and just trying to get kids interested in something nowadays. It's very tough.
Yeah,
because they have so many distractions and so many points of stimulus that trying to get them interested in this is tough. I met a kid in college when I went down for the Blue Ghost launch, which is a Firefly built this spacecraft. SpaceX launched it, and it was a NASA mission.
That's interesting.
So two private companies, and then all these other private companies and or academic associations, a couple of universities, launched 10 different experiments on this lunar lander.
Oh, wow.
And it's all the data is going to NASA for the specific goal of building a base on the moon, a permanent base on the moon.
Yeah, they're talking about landing on the moon again, aren't they?
Yes, but not just to land and be like a tourist and do experiments and come back, to have a permanent beachhead on the moon.
That'd be interesting.
But the Chinese are already moving that way, so they're frankly, I think they're somewhat ahead of us. Everybody doesn't understand that the Chinese have a space station in orbit right now.
Oh, they have their own separate one. I
Been
didn't
there
even
for
know
a couple
that.
of years.
Yeah,
several years, and it's currently occupied 365 days a year.
Wow, that's you just taught me something I didn't know. So, but yeah, it's it's an interesting thing. I have a cousin who actually is up at Barnes, who's one of I don't know, I think he's the vice commander now. My cousin's Andy St. Jean up there, and he was an intel guy. Maybe I can reach out to him and see if we can. I love Space Force. Air Force, it's different.
It's separate now, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know anybody in Space Force, but I
have a couple of contacts here and there, and I'm trying to just hook people up as we go. And that's kind of the point of the going down there was, yes, I do love to watch rockets launch. Don't get me wrong, but there was some other business down there. I got Firefly, the contact for their STEM coordinator, and gave that to Lauren, and so that they can hopefully establish something and get something going. And then a student heard Brady LePage, one of my part-timers, talking about it. And she's like, oh, I love that kind of stuff. What's that guy name? Let me get in touch with him. And, and she already writes a newsletter. So I'm like, if you could do the content part of it, I can definitely do the production part of it.
Yep.
And we'll work together. We might be able to do something really cool.
Yeah.
So she's psyched and I'm psyched, and we finally might get the show off the ground. So, yeah, there's lots of things going on.
Yeah. You talk about the space stuff. My favorite job, everybody knows I've been a police officer for a long time. I love my job. But my favorite job was when I was in the Air Force. I was an F-16 aircraft mechanic, and that was my favorite job. I love that. Unfortunately, the F-16 plant is in Fort Worth, so I'd have to move, but I'm not planning on moving. I can retire in a year and a half. I'm probably going to stick around another 3 or 4, maybe a little bit longer, depending on what happens with some promotional stuff. But it was my favorite job. There's nothing, even now, we had the A-10s when I came back from active duty. I worked on those in the back shop, which is not a flight line position. And there's nothing quite like, even to this day, I look up and I say, God, I miss that job. It was a blast working for the Air Force and, being a crew chief, and it just was a blast. But we've gotten way off topic. So this is Everything now Southwick, not Everything Aerospace. But, although we've got, like you said, all the businesses in town, the shops and manufacturing that do a lot for the aerospace industry. But so we had to do our show a little bit late, like you said, because we did.
We tried to get you in here before I
Yeah.
left, and that didn't work
I caught
out,
your
so.
message a little too late, and then with everything going on, plus, let's see, I went to Vegas right before Christmas, got COVID, came back, got a little bit better, ended up with the norovirus 4 days later, and then got turned in after that, got bronchitis, so I was a mess for about 2 weeks after Christmas. But
Oh, you're having way too much fun.
oh yeah. I guess that's what comes with age. You just I don't know. But so here we are, Everything Southwick. So
So the last show we did, Doug Mogulin was previewing the special town meeting.
yes, the special town meeting. So we had the special town meeting. So let's see if I remember all the articles. We had the article on the traffic. That was a citizen petition. That was an interesting one. It was a little, I wouldn't say contentious, but the Economic Development Court commissioners came up with that, and Southwick is a unique animal when it comes to our businesses and districts and trying to coordinate. So there was a lot of pushback because obviously we've turned, this city here in Westfield went with the 25 mile an hour citywide, and believe me, I've heard nothing but complaints about that. For certain areas, it's not a bad idea, but I don't know. Everybody's in a rush.
I think they should have went with the thickly settled rule. Like there were certain, if you designate an area thickly settled, used to be 25 miles an hour, and then everywhere else was 35.
Yeah, I don't think the blanket was a good idea, but but you have to do that home rule thing through the state and stuff. So there was some, but the biggest pushback was on that initiative was it's a state highway, so even it was non-binding. A couple people stood up and talked about that and said, well, we could vote yes, it's a non-binding article because the state has to get involved. We'd have to do studies. So even if it were to get approved, go through the select board, and we said yay or nay and whatever, it would have took a lot more time. But there's some validity to it. There's some crosswalk areas that I talked with Mr. Diley, who's our Economic Development Coordinator chair, and I said, Greg, this is, I'm not necessarily philosophically opposed to the idea. I'm not a big fan of the speed limit thing, but the road was redesigned for a certain thing. But there are some areas that could benefit. But the biggest issue there is the push was for mostly about the walking traffic. And one of the things that's come up during the master plan and stuff like that, what can we do to make it more friendly? Southwick is a weird animal. Actually,
It's not really a walking
No,
town.
unfortunately, I think I mentioned to you, was talking with Mr. Didi today. We were talking for a little while, and I said, it's interesting. And I remember when I first got on, Mr. Steinhardt said, and actually Mr. Fox told me that the original plan for Southwick was the center was supposed to be more generally located where the cemetery is. And that's the problem with Southwick. We have like a fractured center. We have 57 here. We've got a stretch of 10 and 202 and 57, and then it goes here. And that's where the downtown and the business was back in the day. So, like I said, the initiative was to slow things down, to make things more walker-friendly, but unfortunately, we don't have public transit, and everything's so apart with the way the business restrictions are and the different zoning, that it's just not convenient. And I was saying to Mr. Didi today, I said, the only way, the master plan talked about making it walker-friendly, more business-friendly. I would love to bring in more businesses, and I'm still trying. I'm going to continue to look for more revenue and stuff. Whether I'm even, one of the things I'm going to announce is I am running again. I made that decision. I put it on Facebook. So one of my things has always been trying to bring in more revenue to take some of that pressure off the tax base, off the residents, and to bring more businesses into town, and make Southwick a little, we're not Westfield, we're not Northampton, we're never going to have that downtown feel.
But you're also not Long Meadow.
No, we're not. You
know what I mean? That's the other opposite of the coin.
Yep. But the biggest issue is for 57 is we technically don't have like a center town green. Every time I go by one in different towns, I'm like, where could we put that?
Where would it logically make sense?
I keep looking, but it's like, unfortunately, you've got Everything Bagel, or not Everything Bagel, the new bagel place. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, folks.
Fancy Bagel.
Fancy Bagel, yes, because there's all the.
But that's the intersection of 10, 202, and 57.
So my envision is for me to see it work, and I know there was a lot of talk about we have housing issues, mixed use and stuff like that. My envision, if that was ever to work, you've got 3 or 4 residences that are still stuck in between there and Roma. Unfortunately, the way our business and we still have those residences in the center, and I could see it working if that whole strip became business, and stuff like that. But we also have, as far as the mixed use and stuff like that, we'd have to change a lot of our zoning and planning because we don't really have that in our business district right now or in our zoning. And the other thing we don't have is we have a limit on heights and this, that, and the other thing. So a lot of that would have to change to make it really function the way everybody wants it.
Well, to make it attractive to business.
Yeah. And and it's tough because everybody talks about the shopping small, and we definitely should support your local businesses, whether it's here in Southwick or here in Westfield or wherever. It's kind of depressing, when you remember when I were kids, you could go to stores in your town and get everything you need. Now it's like, you have a part for a certain thing like Radio Shack. I mean, you go to Best Buy now, you can't find all those little connectors and stuff you necessarily need. You might have to order them. And yeah, Amazon's a great thing for that type of animal, but that's really what's hurt the brick and mortars. And I mean, I just read yesterday, GameStop's going to be closing some of their locations and reducing. And we've lost all that stuff. It's nice to see the little businesses pop up that way, but that to support that, you need that infrastructure. And Southwick doesn't have the infrastructure laid out the right way right now. Mm-hmm. Hopefully down the road we can figure something out. But that's something we need to work on there. So that was one of the big things there as far as the town meeting. The other thing was one of them was the CPC initiative to get CPC funds for the Historical Commission, Historical Society. We have 2 different things. A lot of people don't realize the Historical Society is actually a separate private committee or society, and we actually have our Historical Commission, which is a town commission, and they're actually 2 different entities. So the Historical Society is the one that runs the museum and the old Moore House down at the end, and the piece of property they wanted to get was part of that farm back in the day. It was originally industrial. At one point, it was one of the places they were looking to put a marijuana grow. There was all sorts of stuff. Or actually, when I came on, there was a host community agreement. It never came to fruition. But I think, the CPC initiative did pass. It did pass there, and we hopefully that piece will get bought up because there's a conservation restriction. They were only looking for a small amount to buy off the conservation restriction and be able to set up some kiosks and some informational stuff and put in some parking. So we'll see where that goes. You know, they still have to do some funding and get everything in place to buy the actual property. But the part that the town is related to, that part passed as well. Let's see, I'm having a complete brain dump. What are the other ones that happened? I almost have to look at my phone. It was just happened so quick. Let's see, but in Southwick, people are like, what are you doing? Special town meeting. So that went on. You know, what we got also while I'm looking this up, budget season's coming in. You know, Joe and I were talking about that as he's the chair of the finance committee.
Yep. Yeah, I just got the notification that my budget's going to be due soon. So
Yeah, you know what it's like with everything going on. So let's see, 7 days ago, what do we, let's see. So we had the town meeting warrant. Let's see here. Conservation restriction for the highway. Oh, the town hall restoration. So that was another one where we have CPC funds being involved. It's, you know, unfortunately, as you know, and I know and have known since before I got elected, there's Massachusetts is wonderful with prevailing wage and all these different things and engineering. So town hall during the roof project, they because it isn't, the original was consolidated school, and they, during the roof project, they found that there was a problem with water permeating between the original brick and the facades, and the brick pointing, and there was water leaking in. So during that, they found out that they had to do something with it. So they're going to do, we have to do the engineering, and that's 10% of it, so 155,000. I'm not 100% sure if that's the exact number. That had to be approved through community preservation, and it's going to be used to help maintain and keep the, eventually keep the town hall sealed up and no more water leaks, and we don't have to worry about the moisture popping out, pointing on bricks and cement like that. So that was one of them. So the conservation restriction, the EDC initiative. So the other things where we had to, the police department's printer was 15 years old and was dying. So they just moved around a little bit of funding there, and that got passed. And what was the other one? Town limit, speed limit, and of course I don't have my glasses, but restoration, town hall, reserve fund transfer. Oh, the other one was the other one was also related to an interdepartmental transfer. We finalized the collective bargaining agreement finally with the fire department like a month or two ago, and they had to move funds from the, technically the way it works with Southwick is they put it into the reserve fund. In Southwick, you actually have to have a town meeting to move the money around unless you designate it specifically into that budget line item. So where things were not figured out as far as the bargaining agreement, exactly what it was going to cost, that money went into a reserve salary fund, and so we had to move that
transfer
around.
it out. Yeah.
So that happened, you know, and that's where we are with that. So that was the big town meeting stuff. What else do we got going on? So like I said, we're getting ready for budget. We had our preliminary select board meeting and members with all the different members of this regional school. Is it right before Christmas? So we learned what's coming down the pipe with that. So we learned that the track needs to be, I guess it's designed to every 10 years or so, you're supposed to resurface it. So that's going to be a chunk of change we have to come up with. And what I ended up doing is I've obviously learned a lot these first 3 years. Still got a lot more to learn, and hopefully I'm around after May to continue to move forward. There's a lot of restrictions on community preservation funding and what it can and can't be used for. But after doing the research, the original number we were given is it's going to be $192,000 to resurface the track. Fortunately, after doing my research, you know, not 100%, but I believe after doing all my research, I've talked with Nicole, our CAO. I brought it up to Joe today, and I've mentioned it here and there before this. We should be able to use CPC funds, so that might take some of that pressure off the school budget. And so, and then there's a couple other big capital items coming up with the school, and heating and
that is still shouldered kind of with you and Tolland, right?
all three now. So Southwick.
Oh, Granville, right? Granville jumped in.
So 14. It's 14% for Granville, 4% for Tolland. So that leaves us with 82% is ours.
Right.
And what's interesting is a lot of people don't realize Southwick as a town, because the schools were originally Southwick's, as is the property. We actually still own that property. So using the CPC funds, it's not like a regular regional school district we are a regular regional school district, but
it was originally incorporated as
part of the town's property. So
right.
actually, the school district leases it from the town. I mean, so it's kind of like a weird scenario. But so that 82%, it would come out of our budget. I don't know. There's some unique, because of the three towns involved. I don't. That's something we're going to have to figure out. Do we shoulder the load with the CPC, and rather than taking money or adding money into our budget? Because that's what's unique about Southwick. Because it's a regional school district, it's basically, here's your school budget, and approve it or not. We don't.
Right.
The only way you get all the specifics is if you're on one of the boards. Not only, but you can also, as a citizen, say, hey, I want to see what your budget is. Show me your budget. And the school is, 70, a large chunk of our budget. I think it's 20.
Well, yeah, I mean, any municipality, that the school department is going to be the biggest chunk of the budget. And what people don't understand is the biggest chunk of the school department budget, just like with any other business, is personnel is your biggest load on a budget.
Yeah. Yep. Your employees and the benefits are pretty big, and we're actually going into that as well. The school is their contract is either 1 or 2 years off of the regular town one, so they're going to be starting negotiations with the teachers and school employees. I think the first meeting's the 29th. Ms. Parker, usually it's the chair, but because I'm coming into my re-election campaign and the end of my first term, and Nicole's new, I've said, look, I'm going to pass this off to you because I may not be around when this is done. So she's going to be the town's negotiator. What's good is she actually, before she came from here, she was the town administrator in Hardwick, and they have a regional school district out there. She said what's interesting about Southwick is Southwick School District and in committee works a lot better with the town here. I guess in a lot of these other regional school districts, it's like, here's our budget, fund it. And we don't care where you get it from, and we're not going to cut things and stuff like that. The school in Southwick, we've been very fortunate. Jen Willard, which she used to be the personnel director here in Westfield, she got hired, it was before I moved back to town. And she's a very reasonable person. She comes to us and says, hey, this is what we're looking at. What do you need? But this year, because we're going into contract negotiations, it's going to be a number that's up in the air right now. And then the other capital items that are going to be big that are coming up is some heating and air conditioning stuff for Woodland, and then the regional school. It was an interesting little note. I went there, graduated from there in '89 when it was Southwick High School, and the main heating system for the main portion of the building is still based on this 1971 boiler. It's still working, but as things age out, they're running out of it's harder to get parts.
Yeah.
And
sure.
Unfortunately, when they engineered the school, when they did the addition, they didn't quite engineer it right. So there's these science wings and a few other spots we learned from the facilities manager, Eric Wickander, are not engineered right. And probably on days like today, he said if we get a stretch where it's below freezing for a little bit, the state has specific minimum standards for heating, which is 68 degrees, and those wings sometimes drop below those standards. So we need to get that system replaced, and because it's all going to be integrated, we have to re-engineer the entire school project, and those are some big numbers.
Sure, yeah.
I'll wait and let the school department and after the budget season, those numbers will pop out. But what I really was looking at is when they told us about the track, and I did the research. I'm like, hey, at least we can take $192,000. Hopefully, if it gets approved and everything goes the way it is, and there's not any little hidden caveats, we can use that to fund the replacement of the resurfacing of the track at the school. But like I was saying to Joe today, I said, hey, when I ran on that thing, it was gravel, and many times I pulled the gravel out of my knees falling on that track. But not that I want to go back to gravel, but it's a chunk.
It has progressed.
Yeah. So one of the other things that they brought up was 52 years ago, they put in $50,000 in to do a study for the fields at Southwick. As much as I would love to be able to afford to put in a synthetic field and a soccer area and bleachers, because the bleachers have been gone for several years. That used to be over by Powder Mill. There used to be a row of trees and the bleachers, and that's where I had my our graduation picture done, and that's actually where graduation was done, over there on the track, and a lot has changed over the years. So they brought
that wasn't
up.
Needed, like, because did they use Wally Park at all for some of their stuff? Or?
So Wally Park only they use it for some of the softball, some of the baseball, and some of the soccers when they do it under the lights.
Gotcha.
That was one of the things actually when I first got on, because we do own the properties at the school. I mentioned, hey, why don't we speak with Eric and Jen and the school committee and say, hey, let's work together to try and coordinate where Wally Park does become the home field for the big events. But that's something we'll have to maybe discuss again. But rather than redesigning, because the way Southwick's athletic fields are designed, it's always been interesting. You've got fields up in the front corner, fields up here. When I was on the baseball team, our varsity baseball team field is actually over on the old Powder Mill property with the dugouts and what like that. But, those have been there since before I graduated from there. So there's some needs there. Unfortunately, it costs money. Is that going to happen anytime soon? I don't see it happening anytime soon. I don't think there's a huge appetite to spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on the athletic fields right now. The primary focus needs to be on those buildings and the necessities.
Yep, the athletic fields become a secondary thing, or a kind of, it'd be nice to have thing, but it's not a must have thing.
Yes. Now, I like the drawings I've seen for what they want to do up on Montgomery Road, which I guess the push now here is to go with a comprehensive, which it makes sense in a funding and money spending area, because you got one rather than multiple.
It gives all the kids in secondary education the shot at taking potentially a Chapter 74 track if they want to.
Yeah, and that's so the big issues now is like I said, budget. We had our town meeting. Myself, Nicole, Mr. Dede, Mr. Moglen, and Miss Gale will be heading out to Boston on Wednesday for the Mass Municipal Association meeting. That's where we get to hear, where the Mass Municipal comes forward, and
hear where the state's head's at.
Mass Municipal Association represents the municipalities only. It's not part of the state, and they're the ones.
Right,
they're
but
basically.
Doesn't the state usually send some speakers in to kind of give you what they're thinking?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a cheerleading section, cheerleading thing for, the way Massachusetts is out in Boston. We kind of get forgotten at times. But they talk about, like last year with the new millionaire surcharge tax, that's when a lot of the money got put into education. I know Governor Haley did her State of the State thing, and I guess most of that money, not a larger portion of that money this year, when that got created, the decision was made that it's supposed to be split between transportation and education. So as we all know, when most of it's going to transportation, we're not going to see much of it out here. The necessities, the bridges, things that are the politicians really push for. And unfortunately, like here out west, we have Senator Mark. he has to cover 53 different towns and municipalities, where you go out east and you've got multiple representatives for a lot smaller areas. And when they did the redistricting, I'm like, it's just, it doesn't make any sense. I know it's based on population, just like at the federal level, but it's just, it kind of, we get thrown out in the kind of,
You get put on the back burner.
yeah, oh yeah, that's right. Because you talk to most people and it's like, oh, so you're from Western Mass, so you're from the Worcester area. No. It goes even farther, folks. So even, so you're in between Springfield and Worcester. Well, nope, keep going. Oh, really? So we'll be going down to Boston and dealing with that. See what's coming up. There's what's good is each day there's a couple of different sessions that the different members can attend that are informational in purpose. Excuse me. The first year I was on the aggregation program, and I'll bring that up in a minute because we're almost to the point for implementation. That's where I learned about these municipal aggregation and was able to get that program pushed through the town meeting and the select board. So I learned about that. I learned a lot about some labor law stuff out there that I didn't know about. And that there's things that they talk about. The upcoming changes in municipal law, there's labor law stuff, there's stuff that deals with the DEI, and there's a lot of different opportunities of seminars for us to attend. And it's tough because there's only 3 sessions split over 2 days, and sometimes there's a lot more you want to go to, but that's how we just look at each other and say, which are the ones you really want to go to, and which are the ones you really want to go to, and let's try and work it out. So that comes up. We'll be out there Thursday, Friday, into Saturday. So there's that. And then what else do we got going on here? So with the budget and stuff like that, budget hearings will be March 1st and March 8th, unless anything changes. We always do those on Saturdays, Saturday mornings. Sometimes they stretch out a little bit longer. So those are the big things, like, not a lot of big things, but there's a lot going on right now, especially with budget season. It's like this is the busiest time of year. It's been a busy 2 years, really. It was interesting. The first year I was on the select board, there was I joked with my wife. I go, it's no fair. I'm the chairman, and there's a lot. There's so much going on this year. Not that it's not fair, but like my first year on, when I was the clerk, of course, it was also because I was new and I was just kind of sitting back and learning. It was a much lighter workload. Some people might disagree. Maybe Mr. Fox would disagree or whatever, but it seemed to be a lot lighter workload. But you know what? It's also been great in some ways because I've learned an awful lot this year. And what I missed out on was Carl. Carl was wrapping up the end of his career and had stuff going on. So I had him as a resource, but he wasn't around as much. And he was a big resource, and I think that's where, for the last 34 years, your select board members have had a major. They
had an advantage.
Yeah, Carl was considered. Nicole says he was known as one of the OGs for town administrators.
Yeah,
I think he
absolutely,
was. Yeah. I want to say when he retired, there might have been only one other town administrator, town manager, that had more time. I think. And I don't know if it was just specifically because of Southwick, but more time as a town manager than Carl ever had. He was in 34 years, that's a lot. You know, and that means he was.
And usually they bounce around, so.
Yeah, they'll
do it like a decade somewhere.
So we were very fortunate that Carl came from, because he grew up near Boston, and he came out here and he fell in love with Southwick and he stayed forever. And I still use Mr. Steinhardt as a resource and check in on him for the holidays and stuff. He's a great guy. I wish I'd had more opportunity to work with him. But let me say this, Nicole is very, very knowledgeable. She is very, very, very knowledgeable. She knows her stuff.
Yeah, she's been in here a couple times.
I was going to bring her last time, but this time because we had to move things around because of your
scheduling.
Their scheduling, and I couldn't fit in before that. I didn't get to bring her with me this time because she's right on point because this is what she does every day. So I could turn to her and say, what else have we been going on? So, that's what's going on. We're going out to Boston and stuff for that. And then, like I said, a lot of people for the last 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6 months, people have said, are you going to run again?
Well, it's not a decision you make lightly either.
No, when I talked to you when I first came on, people see you at the meetings and they see you at the functions here and there. I tell you what, as chair this year, part of it has been because I really want to be involved because I really wanted to learn a lot more.
Yep.
It is a lot of work for a chairman. I mean, you're responsible for signing off on everything, not everything, but at the beginning of the year, the fiscal year, they deem you, usually the chairman, as the guy that signs off on all the contracts and different things. And it's definitely been eye-opening. This whole 3-year term has definitely been eye-opening. Like I joked about with you when I dove in as far as at the municipal level, head first without any water in the pool. So at least now I've got a little bit, like the pool's half full.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot, and I finally gotten to the point, honestly, I've never been comfortable in a top leadership position because I've never really had one. So when I first came into that, I hated seeing myself on the camera. I didn't like talking to public. And one of the things that's now come super, super easy for me, it's always been interesting because you put me in a uniform as my career and in front of 500 college kids, I got no problem. I don't care. Nothing bothers me, anything like that. You put me on that stage when like last 2 or 3 years ago when I started to run, I remember Peter Courier from when he came out, it's like, and I saw my picture in the paper, I'm like, I don't like being the center of attention. So it's been really good. Joe and I talk quite a bit, and like I said to him, I wouldn't say I've come into my groove, but I've gotten to a point where I'm a lot more comfortable now, and I've learned enough where I don't mind speaking out a lot more. Diane and I have gotten into, Diane, it's been a lot more. Mr. Moglen made the comment, I think at our last big meeting, or the one before that, he goes, this is the first time since he's been on the board where there was 2 votes made where they weren't unanimous.
I remember him saying that.
When I first got on my first or second meeting when we did some appointments to the committees, I remember Peter reaching out to me. You realize you're the first person that's voted no, and there hasn't been a unanimous decision in like 9 years. I'm like, and? I just am.
Well, the other thing usually is what Mr. Moglen was saying is that by the time you came to the vote, you may not totally agree with it, but you've reached a consensus on it.
For the most part, or at least a position of understanding. I joke about it. People have joked around it. They're like, well, we can't quite figure it out. I said, good. You're never going to want to figure me out. I said, it shouldn't be an automatic. There should be some debate. There should be some discussion. And that was one of the things that, like I said, they made Peter Courier made a story out of it because there hadn't been that in a long time. But it's, like I said, I've learned an awful lot, and I want to come back for more. People are like, are you sure you want to do that? And I, because it's a lot.
Is that because you feel you have unfinished business?
I want to continue to work to find ways to bring business into town, bring revenue into town, take some of that pressure off the residents. And, the toughest thing is now with the way the economy's been, I looked up the research. The valuations of houses in the state of Massachusetts have gone up 8.8% every year over the last 3 years. So you're across the board in the state, your tax valuations, your assessments have gone up 24%.
Yep.
I mean, since we moved into town in Southwick in 2019, with the valuations the way they are, it's personal business. My wife might yell at me, but our tax bill has gone up $600 a month. Our payment, I should say, has gone up $600 a month since we started moving to town, and that's over $7,000. and a lot of people are in Southwick. When they did the master plan, it's an aging community, and 33, it's either between 33 or 37% of our population is considered aging or elderly, and people are on fixed incomes, and unfortunately, the incomes have not kept pace with the property assessments and valuations and cost of living. So those are the things I'm really trying to look for, and like another plan like the aggregation. And if there's anything, I'm proud that I did that. Eventually, like I said, I'll hit that again in a minute. But when that program gets up and running to its full potential, that will keep more money in people's pockets, a little less money off your electric bill. But it's also based on markets and times when there's bids, and it's an interesting animal to learn about that as well. And then, like, I've said it, I'm not a cannabis person. I never have been. But that, for lack of a better term, free revenue, as much as people fought me on that at the beginning, when we got Pioneer Valley Trading Company, they're going through their planning board stuff right now. They're waiting on their approval from the state. Then they'll come back in front of the planning board to get their special permitting. And, hopefully they'll be up and running a little bit before, sometime between now and July. And, the forecasted revenues, I've looked at like Westfield and stuff. It's probably a couple $100,000 once both places get up and running, which on a budget the size of Southwick's is actually, not a huge chunk, but it's beneficial. Obviously, any additional tax revenue is beneficial, and that's the additional 3% on top of the fact that you're going to have the property taxes and whatnot that are going to come with those properties. So if anything, even if I were not to be reelected, I can say, hey, I accomplished this, and I helped with my fellow board members, and we accomplished this. And, I wrote the town flag policy. With all the North Pond stuff going on, there's been a lot we've been talking about that a lot. I've just sat down and I took, over the last couple of months, they did the North Pond Task Force, and there was some discussion, and they've come up with some ideas about enforcement of rules and posting of rules and how you do it. So Diane and I have been in a little bit of back and forth on that, and so what I did is, you remember it, our public nuisance, our nuisance household ordinance, bylaw. It's bylaw in Southwick, ordinance in Westfield, because they're cities and towns. So I took that as a model, and I've played around with that. I actually just sent it to Nicole today, modified to our needs as a town of Southwick. It addresses the nuisance problem as a whole, not just from the North Pond perspective or parking on specific streets. So I'm hoping that'll go through. I'm hoping people will see the benefit of that, because that addresses everything. Noise. We've had some issues with our Airbnb bylaw that got passed. People are now supposed to register their Airbnbs and get their everything in order, and people aren't doing that, and that happens everywhere. They're still doing it, depending on the towns, or they've tried to find ways to go around it. There's been some complaints there from the pond since that went into place. The North Pond issues. I've had a couple residents that have reached out to me where they've had problems with neighbors with noise. And the way some of our bylaws are written, unfortunately, they're very vague. And as you know, Peter, being a former dispatcher, and me as a police, there's also discretion. So if there's nothing really written out as to how to handle with it or to deal with it, it's like, well, what do I do here? We still have discretion as officers on that side, even if there's nothing specific in place. But there's more you can do if you have something in writing, and I'm really pushing hard. I will push to make sure this proposed nuisance bylaw, I'm going to ask for it to be on the warrant for the spring meeting, for our annual town meeting. So I've been working on stuff like that. And again, I'm looking at anything I can to bring in revenue to the town. Some people have said, well, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. I disagree with that. I've read that a couple days ago.
Listening to Joe, I don't think you do either.
You've got to be prudent with what you're spending, but I haven't seen any too much frivolous spending. If actually, and no frivolous spending. I know I've tried to maintain a mentality of, I want to know what my department heads want. I want to know what you need, and then I ask them for their wish list, and then I have to look at the budget, which we're still waiting on. We got to wait for cherry sheets and all that other stuff. So it's as you know, it's a process that takes sometimes several months, and then that budget gets set by recommended by the finance committee, and then put forward by the select board, and then it's voted on at town meeting. So, but that's kind of what I'm looking at. I want to stick around a little bit longer. I've said to several people, as far as the select board, I think 2 terms will be enough for me. If I were to be reelected, if people come back in 3 years and I'm reelected, I'll finally be either close to retirement or retired, depending on how things go. And, I can focus my time, not more specifically, but a little bit more time more directly on the select board. And I enjoy it. It's been a very rewarding and honor to serve the residents of Southwick doing it this way. And like I said, it's been very eye-opening. There's always a lot of criticism and critiquing, but one of the things people say, well, it's easy to criticize, do something about it. And that's that's why I got involved 3 years ago. And it wasn't about anybody making the wrong decision. It's like, all right, everybody wants to talk a big game, I'll do it. I just sat in the background and weighed my options. And
there's usually a tipping point, and there's usually one issue that drives people to run for office.
For me, it really wasn't one issue when I ran 3 years ago. It was just, this is my hometown. It's been my hometown before. I came back. I've lived in the area my whole life as a municipal employee on one side. I've been very fortunate to have to be involved in municipal government one way or another for 28 years, and prior to that, I worked for the federal government. So I've been a negotiator for the Superior Officers Union when I was a superior officer. I've been a negotiator for the patrol union, and it gives me a very unique perspective. We actually started our discussions, ground rules for negotiations for the police department, my work at Westfield, and I'm a negotiator again. And it gives me a unique perspective. And I said to Ann and Shayna, I said, well, if anything, I got probably the most unique perspective of anybody at this table because I deal with it on both sides.
Right.
So I know what the needs are for as an employee, and pretty much the needs, not so much the wants. Everybody wants more money and whatever, but I know what the needs are compared to the wants, and it's it gives, like I said, it gives me a unique perspective, and I've really enjoyed it. I don't want to go anywhere, and like I said, I announced it, and this is, I guess, my first real official public announcement about it, other than just saying, hey, people have asked, I'm going to run again. So I plan on being around, and if I run, I'm not running to lose, believe me. My intent is to be around, and I think you and I talked it because there was so much personal animosity 3 years ago in some aspects. Not me. I've never made this personal, nor the same thing with my career. It's like you deal with people that do or don't like you, and it's not a personal thing. You just have to put that all aside. I'm doing this because I want to, not because I need to, not because I have to, not because I have an agenda or an ego that needs to be stroked. It's just, and I never thought I'd enjoy it as much as I do. I actually, I said to folks, I said, it's almost now, after 20-something years and the way that society has changed, this is almost more rewarding than my 28 years in law enforcement. I've loved it, like I said, and I'm not digging my career in any way, shape, or form. I still enjoy it, still love it, but
well, in the select select board role, you're seeing results in a different way than you see in the police
that's
department
a good way
role.
to put it, Pete. Absolutely.
So in the police department role, you don't always see the results because the call comes, the call goes. You don't know the turnout. You don't know what happened after the story.
Yep.
In the select board role, you can see the end of the tunnel.
Yep.
Because you know, in a law enforcement role, you have a brief like exposure to somebody or something or a problem.
You probably you solve
And
that initial problem.
you're a flashpoint type fixer.
Yep.
In a select board role, you can see it through, and you can see even if you leave the office, you can still see the results of it afterwards.
Yeah. And that's one of the things why I brought up the nuisance bylaw recommendation, because you hear the complaints, especially we all heard what happened with North Pond, and there was a lot of we had that big public meeting and hearing, and there was a lot of back and forth, and something needs to be done. But like I said, and that's why I brought this forward, and hopefully some version of that will go through, and even if I'm gone, I can say, hey, cool, at least now we can do something about it from a different angle, rather than just saying, well, what can we do? We will have anything in writing. There, you need some sort of baseline rules, and that was one of the problems with North Pond too. The rules for the conservation restrictions and everything like that were never posted very well, and so people didn't know what they could and couldn't do. You technically not even supposed to go out there with a picnic lunch and sit and eat that. You can, there's a lot of stuff that people didn't know, and that's one of the other reasons I want to continue running, because I see a lot of, social media is social media. I pay attention to it, and I always take notes and see what people are complaining about. But for the most part, I don't get involved on it. The couple of times that I've done that, I just post, hey, I see this. Here's the real information that I can give you, and what I know and what the interpretation is. Here you go. I just dealt with something recently. There was just a lot of discussion about, it was something to do about, I think it was kind of about the budget and the select board in general. And I just said, hey, let me put this in terms that everybody understands. It was about the valuations and tax rates. And I said, Massachusetts, and I'm going to be blunt here, Massachusetts, as far as taxes go, sucks.
Yeah.
It's
not the worst, but it's also not even close to being the best.
No, we are.
California's the worst.
Yep. We're in the top 10, though. I think we're
I'm sure we are.
6 or 7.
Yeah, I'm sure we are.
For an example, I would love to go, and I plan on at some point getting a vacation home. I wouldn't really call it a vacation home as much as a second place to go when I want to out in Las Vegas. And just for ha-has, I was looking at the tax rates. I could buy an $850,000 home, condo in Clark County, and it would cost me $4,500. Here, an $850,000 house is going to cost you upwards of $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 on your taxes. And
yeah, sure.
I mean, it's a different animal in Clark County because you've got Vegas, but that tax rate actually is the state set tax rate for properties, and it's a big difference. And
yeah,
it's like, how do you solve that problem? But people, what I like to get the information. If I don't know it, I love to learn it, and I want to make sure everybody else knows it. And that's why I pay attention, but I try not to get involved, because social media is just social media. It's like you see that. It's like I always say it like in my career. It's always the 1%, 2%, 3%, 4% of the people that stir up the most, cause the most problems, and everybody else kind of takes the heat for it. And that's kind of what it's been like online. But I like to tell people this is what it is, and but nobody ever really does anything about it. But I did 3 years ago. I said, to heck with it. If you're gonna talk the talk, walk the walk, right?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So that's where we are with that. What else is going on? So people are going to say, well, you didn't talk about this, you didn't talk about that.
You need to come in with an agenda.
Yeah, well, this one was, like I said, we had to rearrange and we had to figure it out. I actually have a notebook at home with almost 6 or 7 different pages of things that, that I'll either talk about it when I run or that have come up recently that I would like to talk about. Oh, one of the big ones, is this going to be, and I brought this up in my post. I said to people, I said, I'm listening to hear what you have to say about taxes. And I'm trying to find the ways that we can make a difference and a noticeable difference in folks' pockets. And this is going to be the first time some people hear about it, but I'm going to put it out there. CPC, one of our biggest hits is that's 3% on, it's a surcharge. It's not a tax. A lot of people call it a tax. So once you vote and you put in the community preservation fund in your town, it's a surcharge. And when this first went into effect in Massachusetts, your first $100,000 will exempt. Well, as you and I know, if you've bought a house 10, 15 years ago, that first $100,000 was probably 50% thereabout of your base, of the total cost of your house. So that by exempting that first, like, I'll give a prime example. When I bought my house here in Westfield several years ago in Springdale, I bought it for $150,000 house. And Westfield does have the CPC or CPA, whatever they call it here. Mm-hmm. So that 3% or whatever percent Westfield actually takes was only on $50,000. Now, I did the research also when I brought this comment up about the taxes. The average median cost of a home in the state of Massachusetts, when I did the research in December, was like $619,000. Mm-hmm. So take that 3% on your assessed value, and Massachusetts is a fair market rate tax assessment, which what a lot of people don't understand. If you don't know what that means, it means whatever the real estate agency or real estate market says your house is worth, that's what you're getting taxed on. So I've been looking, and to me, that's another thing I want to talk about at the next select board meeting or put on the agenda. I've already talked to Nicole about it. At least needs to come up as a discussion. The residents of Southwick are big on preserving land or having the projects like the spray park and the pickleball. But at some point, I think we need to really talk about, I don't want to rescind the CPC, but you have options of the percentages you can take. There's some benefits to going, Southwick does the full 3%. What that does is the state also kicks in. So there's 3 rounds. The state will give you a 1, if you do 1%, they match you. If you do 2% at the second round, they'll match that. If you come back off the 3%, the state will not, there's a third round where whatever's left in the CPC trust fund for the state, it gets metered out accordingly. So there are some drawbacks, I guess, depending on how you look at it, if you go with that mentality with the CPC. But when I look at it, it's like, I want to, for the time being, until like the cost of living or the average evaluation on houses, like prior to the market going crazy and COVID and the lack of resources or inventory, the average was 2-3%. I mean, that's still a decent amount of money on a bigger house, mm-hmm. But it's not that big a hit. And like I said, with an aging population, we need to do everything we can to keep money in people's pockets. So, I'm going to talk to the Community Preservation Fund. I'm going to talk to as many people as I can and say, look, this is what I'd like to do for the time being. Bring that CPC rate down and save some money on people. And then when the market gets better, the economy gets better, or people think we can afford it again, put it back in front of town meeting, we can bring the percentage back up.
The problem is once you lower something like that, it'll never go back. And then here's the other problem is, and if you're using that for specific projects, you'll never have that money again. That's the trade-off.
It is a trade-off, but at some point,
because there is flexibility in that CPC money.
There is
that you can do different things with it that you would normally have to go to town meeting for. So what you're telling the town is hey, there is this surcharge, fee, whatever, but here's what we do with it.
Yeah. Well, that's why, you know.
And that's the education piece. You say, well, if you do want to reduce it, these are the things we can't do anymore.
Exactly. And that's why I want to, I'm going to start bringing, like I said, I've already started talking about bringing it up. I've talked with Joe about it. I've talked to, I actually mentioned it to Diane because as long as it's not on the agenda or we're debating about it or dealing with it, we can, the select board members can discuss things with each other at that. But once it becomes an actual agenda item, we can't talk amongst ourselves because we only have 3 of us and 2 is a quorum and you can't do that. But I brought that up, you know, I briefly mentioned it to a couple people, and it's not about not wanting to spend money on things, but it's about wanting to make sure people have the money that they need in their pockets. So I'm going to continue to look for that. That's my big thing when I run this year, is continue to look for those benefits for the people, keep people money in people's pocket. At the same time, growing Southwick, maintaining the resources and the services that we have, and taking care, you know, as like I said, from sitting on the other side of the table, to make sure our employees and have the resources that they need and the income that they need to continue to be, what's the word I want to use? Contributing members of the workforce as well as the town. So that's, you know, those are going to be my big things. And other than that, I mean, like I said, you're right, Pete. I should have grabbed my notebook there, but most of the stuff was more about like just informing people, and that's, you know, I'm going to have that opportunity during the campaign, and any other discussions I have with people, you know. So I'll have, let's see, we're at January, so Doug will have it next month. I'll have March, and so next meeting for you and I for Everything Southwick could possibly be my last one, you know, because we'll have elections in May, which is like, I think it's the election would literally be either the day before.
When does somebody have to take out papers by?
March. So I learned, that's something I didn't know when I first ran for the town in Southwick. We don't follow, for town elections, we don't follow the same calendar as like Westfield does.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So our elections are in May, and I pulled my papers. I think I just got my notice because I'm an independent member. I actually have to go back out and get those signatures again because I wasn't the nominated candidate for the Republican, the Libertarian, or the Democratic Party.
Yep.
So I just got my notice from the town clerk that they're going to be sending out my papers. So it's usually like right around February, beginning of February, you can start pulling papers, and then they have to be in by mid-March. Because that was what was funny about it. When I ran that time, I said, oh, here's my papers. So I have up until November. They're like, oh, no, the election's in May. I'm like, huh? So, you know, after living in Westfield for all these years, you know, the elections were in November like everything else. So that was a learning experience when I decided to run. Because and even as a member of town, I didn't even really know about town meeting. I thought when I was voting on things in the elections, you know, that covered everything. So it's been a very interesting and exciting and honorable and rewarding 3 years. And I hope the residents of Southwick have been happy enough with what I've done, or satisfied enough with what I've done, that they want to bring me back. And you know what? If they don't, that's their decision.
Yeah, it's their purview.
Exactly. I mean, they'll let us all know in May when the elections happen. I already have, actually, I kind of know who my opponent's going to be, but I'll let that person announce their own campaign when they're ready to do so. But I joked, I said, well, just so everybody knows, I'm not running to lose. If I'm going to do this, I'm all in again. So, so that's where we are. You know, come March, you know, things will be even deeper into that aspect. You and I will discuss it again. And I know, was it 2 years ago, Russ and Diane, Joe actually did a special show, didn't he? Or did he actually do it on his show?
What was that?
When Mr. Fox and Miss Gale ran against each other, because Doug ran basically unopposed last year.
I think
you guys did a show. I just can't remember.
I think we interviewed him separately.
Yes, you did. So I'll put that out there. I have no problem having a meeting with my prospective or other candidate that I'll be running against. You know, I'll be glad to do a debate. I'll be glad to do a discussion or questions, because you know, it's all good. Yeah, that's actually, I'm stealing that from Joe. It's all good. So
There you go.
but so that's where we are. And Pete, thank you for making the time to let me come in and
As always.
do this. And you know, I've enjoyed it. I get to see my buddy Pete that I've known for 20 something years now.
Yeah, the way I look at it is the more the people hear from their politicians, even if it's unscheduled, things like that, the better off the people are because they know what's going on.
Yeah.
There's this mystery of government that there shouldn't be.
No, absolutely. And that's the one thing I hate about like the state level stuff. I mean, and as you know, I'll wrap this up quick because I know we're coming to time. You know, look at what Diane DeZoglio is running into right now. It's ridiculous. We're one of only like 5 or 6 states in the entire country where our legislature, even though our Constitution says they have to answer to us, can hide behind closed doors, take 700 pages and stick their little earmarks and pet projects in, you know, when you're doing a public safety budget. But I'm going to hide my park bill at the end of this one. Good luck if you get to read it. And if, you know, here it is right before you vote on it, but it's buried in there.
Yep.
So Massachusetts, that's one of the other things I hate about Massachusetts. Just be transparent, you know, and,
Yep.
you know, it's going to be very hard for me to sit there at the MMA meeting and not stand up if I hear something I don't like. But, you know, I won't. You know, I'm not the type that likes to cause too many waves,
Yep.
but I will cause waves if need be.
Yep.
So
All
thank
right.
you, Pete.
Sounds good. We'll see you in a couple months, and good luck.
All right. Thanks, my friend.
You know I'm a dreamer, but my heart's of gold. I had to run away high, so I wouldn't come home low. Just when things went right, it doesn't mean they were always wrong. Just take this song, and you'll never be left all alone. Take me to your heart, fill me in your bones. Just one more night, and I'm coming on this lonely, windy road. I'm on my way, I'm on my way, home sweet home. Tonight, I'm on my way, I'm on my way, home sweet home. You know that I've seen too many romantic dreams, up in light, falling off the silver screen. My heart's like an open book for the whole world to read. Sometimes nothing keeps me together at the seams. I'm on my way, I'm on my way, home sweet home.